Okay, there we go.
Oh.
Okay, we're back in business.
Baruch haba, welcome everyone. We are about to do chapter 6 in Derek Tfunos, where we're going to discuss the basis of this 11 statements that we spoke about, the basis of what is, on what basis do we say it's true or false. As we do every class, I like to give us a little bit of orientation again. So the Ramchal have explained that all the Mas and Matan really is based on a few Pulot HaSeichel, which he describes. Pulot HaSeichel means as basic operating principles in the mind. The three things that we're going to be discussing in the Sefer is, first of all, statements. That's the foundation of all thinking. You can't have any communication without talking about a subject and a predicate in a statement. After we do the statements, we'll go on to building with statements, building syllogisms or akashim with statements, and finally the most important thing that we have to do is to see if we're going to accept a statement as true or false. What is the foundation of proof? What is the foundation of disproof? We are holding in the very first part of the analysis of Pulsa Seichel, which is Chavanat Mamori, and we've accomplished the first section, which is to discuss about the Minei Mamarim, which are the various types of statements. And the Ramchal has laid out for us that there's, of course, subjects and predicates. We said that makes a statement a statement. You cannot have meaningful communication without talking about something, a no-say, a subject, and saying something about it, predicating something to it, which is the nasu. And the last time we met, we went over the types of subjects, the general and particular, and the katsasi, the sum, and we went through a list of the 11 predicates. That was all contained in Chapter 3. We also discussed at the end of Chapter 3 some of the Dake Dibor, the manners of speech. In other words, not every statement is said b'nechusa, not every statement is meant literally. Sometimes statements are said in a mashal or a hyperbole, or some people speak at length, and some people speak in a very short language. These are all the various stylistic forms of statements. But what interests us is not the style in the Sefer. What interests us is to plummet into, or to strip away all the stylistic parts of the statement, and to get down to the subject and predicate, which he says that every form of communication must be reduced to. So that's our big work, is to recast the statement from its style, whether it's long, short, hyperbole, and to say, what does it mean? Tell me what you're talking about, what is your subject, what's your no-say, and tell me what you're saying about it, and tell me the form you're saying it in, which particular type of nasu or predicate you're saying. The Ramchal, is going to actually in the next chapter, Chapter 4, and then Chapter 5, he's going to talk about rearranging statements one with the other. In other words, how similar or antithetical or dissimilar are statements. And then finally, in the next chapter, Chapter 5, he's going to talk about inferences. I thought it best for us to skip from Chapter 3, which is a discussion of minimum mamarim, and go right into the truth and falsity of statements. And that's exactly how we did it on the chart, because the truth and falsity of the statements is based on the form of these 11 forms of statements that come, the format that 11 statements are made. So we're going to skip chapters 4 and 5 for the moment and go right into the truth and falsity of statements together. Then we'll come back in the following classes and talk about the inferences and juxtaposition of statements. Okay, with that little introduction, let's go back to our text. And there we are. Chapter 6. Chapter 6 is going to talk about the Klal HaMamarim. The 11 types of statements that we spoke about will be divided now into statements which are true and statements which are false. Ha'emitim, the true ones, hem sham mashru, the true ones say what really is. The kosmim, the false ones, shamru mash'enu, they're the statements that say things that are not. V'hine, tzarech shetavchin b'zeh ben hamamarim hapashutim v'hamamarim hanemra al hashala o haflaga. Again, he warns us. He says, in this analysis of whether we're going to say a statement is true and false, we have to make a distinction between statements which are said literally, or pashutim, as he said, calls them in a simple manner, and statements which are said in a metaphorical or in a hyperbole. Hyperbole means exaggerated form. Why? Ki hapashutim amitasam ukozvam taluim biyos tzodek or bilki tzodek mashin nirmaz b'milosehem lefi havonas hapashut. Simple statements are true or false. They're true, whether they're true or false depends upon whether they're correct or incorrect according to the words that are physically being said. We look at the words and we say, are these true words or are these false words? However, ba'osam sha'al, they're hashala or haflaga, those statements that are said in a metaphoric or in a hyperbole, they're ein ha'emes v'kozet teluim b'mash, move on the pashut milosehem ela beremez ha'mechuvan behem. The truth and falsity of those statements are not going to depend upon the physical words that are in front of us, but the truth and falsity of statements really depends upon the remez, the hint or of what is the statement going to be. And he'll give us an example right now of it. Keshe'omru Rabbi Yochanan, when Rabbi Yochanan said, Ari Allah mi Bavel. In the Gemara it says, a lion came up from Bavel. Ein amita samamar hu mamuvan peshut hamilos. You don't say this statement is true and false according to the simple meanings of the words, i.e., that a lion, a physical lion, came from Babel. Ella, the rem is hanirmaz. It's a mashal, so we have to look at what is the mashal referring to. Shehu sh'adam chacham gadol b'torah olam Babel. Rav Kahana. It's really talking not about a physical lion, it's talking about a lion in Torah, using it in a metaphorical sense, and that is the great Chacham in Torah that came up from Babel, whose name was Rav Kahana. So the statement is not true and false. You don't say, wait a minute, there's no lions, for instance, you say, you prove to me that there's no lions in Babel, no physical lions in Babel, so the statement is false. Well, obviously the statement doesn't talk about a physical lion, it talks about a metaphorical lion. So that's his first warning. You have to be able to strip the layers of style when it comes to metaphor and get to the message, not the physical words, unless the statement is said in a simple sense. And this is one of the difficulties in communication and in understanding this concept of stripping away the stylistic forms and getting to the message is going to not be as easy as it may seem. There may be machlokes about it. Here it's quite obvious that it's a mashal. In other cases it won't be. Od tzarech shitidaktik, another warning the Ramchal gives us. Shitidaktik b'kol ma mashiach l'das sof gezer. You have to be very, very precise and understand what is the final intent of the statement. שבו תהיה תלויים אמיתת המאמר או כוזבו. This final intention, sof gezerah so, is going to be the foundation upon which you say the statement is true or false. וזה, ישחלף לפי, ישחלף המינים שזכר למעלה. And this sof gezerah so, which is the primal foundation of the statement, they're going to be divided according to the 11 types of predicates that we mentioned in chapter 3. So let's go through them with the Ramchal, and we'll strip away all the statements, and we'll see on which points does the truth or the falsity of the statement exist. Ki hine amama hastami, the first type of statement, the simple statement, sof gezerah so, hu hanimsa hanasu hahu benose shiamrehu bo o hedemimenu. The final intent of the statement, the foundation of the statement, upon which we are going to determine whether something is true or false. In a stam statement, we just have to see, does the predicate here exist in the subject? If it's a Mekayim statement, if it is all men are equal, the R is a Mekayim, or hedemimenu, or the statement could be a negative statement, all men are not equal. So we have to just prove whether the statement as it is, whether it's a Mekayim or a Sholei statement, we have to prove whether that is true, whether we indeed find the predicate in the subject. Here's their mashal. Nashim chayavot b'kiddush hayom. Women are obligated on the saying of Kiddush during the day of Shabbos. What is a sof gezerah though? Sheyesh nashim hiyu b'kiddush hayom. That the whole category, now this was a cloudy statement even though the word all was not said, all the complete category of women, we can predicate of them that all of them have the obligation to say Kiddush Hayom. Now, the amitos o talui b'shitiyeh amiskach. This statement now will be true if that predicate is indeed found in the subject. Shitiyena anoshim chayos Kiddush Hayom, that the klal of noshim, of all women, if they indeed have the obligation to say Kiddush Hayom. That's the simple statement. Ach, hamama miyuchad shezchanu, the miyuchad statement that we mentioned. What was the miyuchad statement? Shuhu ha'omer ha'nasu b'nose b'derech miyuchad. It says the predicate is found in the subject in a rather particular way. There we mentioned it was either going to be their vadai, or it's going to be their suffix, or efshar, or efshar, impossible. There, in that type of statement, the sof gezerah so hu himotze hanasu ahu ba'oso hanafse ba'oso haderech. It has to not only be, the predicate only has to be found in the subject, it's in the stam statement, but it has to be the also haderech in that particular manner. The ilu yemotze hanasu b'nose, and even if you find that the predicate is in the subject, achlo ba'oso haderech, but it's not there in a particular derech, lo yehem amitzodik, and the statement is not true. Okay, he's going to give an example. Derech mashal. For instance, we said that the Kohen who bends over the well that may have had a fetus causing tumah in the bottom of the well, we want to know if he's tameh or not. So the Gemara made a statement, Pesachim, Kaven, the chulda, ubardalis mitzuyin sham, vadai garuhu. Since we have weasels and martins and types of rodents there in the bottom of the well, they definitely grabbed the fetus away. So we could say that there's absolutely no tameh for the Kohen, because why? The rodents definitely moved the fetus away. So we said that's a Vadai statement. The statement just does not say that rats possibly could have or they might have grabbed the fetus away. We say that the rodents definitely moved the fetus away. Ilu lo haya vadai shiru, if the truth was that it wasn't definite that they would be able to move the fetus away. Afilu yeraking amimabos, even if it would happen many times, lo haya hamama tzedek. This statement would not be true, since it says they definitely drew the fetus away, moved the fetus away, and therefore there's no more tamei. It must be that it's a definite statement. If we found out it only happens a few times or sometimes, so then this statement would not be true. And so it is with all the other types of miyuchat statements when we say there's a certain predication, if it's a suffix and it turns out to be a vadai, if it's a possibility and it turns out to be an impossibility, or vice versa, so then the whole statement falls down, because we're saying that the predicate has to be there in the specific way that it was outlined in the statement. The third type of statement we said was the mamayit, statement of limitation. What was that? Sha'oma nasu b'nosei u shvalalo mikol zulaso. That type of statement says that there is a predicate in the subject, but it is denied of every other. In other words, there's no other predicate that applies. Here, the self-kazera selhu, and by the way, it could be in the subject also, but the example he's going to give is one of an exclusive predicate. Self-kazera selhu shiba also hadava lavado nimsa also ha'inyan. That only in this particular case will we find this particular subject matter. If we found this predicate or subject that was a mayat, the one that's supposed to be limited in other areas, and then the whole statement falls down. Okay? For instance, Mama Shukasu, the example we brought, this alone can be done for you. The Torah there is telling us that Ochel Nefesh alone is allowed on Shabbat, on Yom Tov. So, Ilu, Hayasamu Teres B'Yom Tov, Asiyas Devorim Acherim, Zulasi, Tzarech Ochel Nefesh, if there was a heter, if he was permitted to do other things on Yom Tov, besides to do malachos besides for Ochel Nefesh, so then lo haya kosav omer levado, the pasuk would not have said exclusively, this alone shall be allowed for you. Shahari ain't levado, because it's not exclusive. In our Mishnah, which says that there's arba avos nezikin, if there's more than that's, we're going to learn arba affords a number of limitation. If we find out that there's 13, then we're going to say the statement is false. Now, because the statement is false doesn't mean that'll be the basis of a kasha, because according to the other text, the statement is false. But we'll see that we can always give it teretz, and we'll say when faced with a contradiction, we'll make a distinction, and the Gemara will go on to show all sorts of different distinctions between our 4 avos nezikin and the other ones mentioned. Okay, let's talk about the Mama Hamotzi. Shemotzi ketzas min ha'niklalim b'nosei min hanasu. This was a statement where we had a klal, and we took out some of those klals from some of those elements that were in the klal, and we took them out of the klal, and we said they don't exist there. Okay. In this statement, Gezeres Shtayim, here we have 2 rules that we're going to have to look at, or two foundations that we're going to have to check to see whether this statement is true. The first one, okay, first we have to know that in the statement we're actually going to find the predicate in the subject. Okay, what's the second one? Shniya. Shiba'osam hamotzi'im, those which we have pulled out of the klal and said it does not have the predicate, afal pi shehem min hanoseahu, even though they're in that subject, they're in that klal, ein behem nasuahu. So those exceptions are going to have to be proven exceptions. So we have two things. We're going to have to find the predicate in the subject, and we're also have to say that that predicate will not be found in those particulars of the subject that we eliminated. Okay? Let's give an example. Derech mashal. In the statement that we said, Hakol shochatin v'shchita san. Oh, I'm sorry. No. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I did skip a line. Ve'im yemotze gam hamotzeim. If we do find that those which are excluded, hine lo yeh kol hamama kosev, and the whole statement doesn't fall down, ela hagzer hashniya tiyeh kosevis v'rishona tzedekus. Only the second gzer, not the first. Very, very important here. We have two gzeres here. One, that we're going to have to find the predicate in the subject. But since this statement says that there are certain parts of the klal that are not there, we're going to have to also find that those exclusions don't have the predicate. But he says, what happens if you destroy the second gezerah? What happens if you find out that the exclusions are not exclusions? So he says, then the whole statement doesn't fall down. The first part still remains. It's still a klal. It just doesn't have those exceptions. It's a very important distinction to make. Just because you prove the exceptions are false, you don't prove the whole statement false. And here's again, one of the critical points of the safe is to point out very, very basic principles where little mistakes come in all the time. A person will say the whole statement is false because the exceptions are false. No, it's not true. The exceptions can be false, and the original cloud can be true. Derech mashal, for instance, the statement in Chulin, Beis Amud Aleph. Hakol shochatim v'shchitasan kasher chutz micheres shoter v'koton. Here we had our klali statement that everyone can do shchita, and that shchita is kosher. Then the Gemara eliminates some chutz, except for the cheres shoter and the koton, the deaf, the insane, and the minor. Now, ilu haya hadin. Shahakol shochten, v'gam cheres shoter v'koton shochetin lo nema shekol hamama kosev. What happens if we found the second gezerah, and we found that really it's true, everyone can do shchita, but we found also that the cheres shoter and the koton also can do it. So now he says lo nema shekol hamama kosev. That would knock out the whole statement as being true. Ella, Hagezer Rishona, Hakol Shochatim Tzedekes, that still can be true. The Hashniya, Chutz Micheres Shoter v'Koton, Eineno Tzedekes, that would be false, the exceptions. So again, in order to destroy this whole statement, you have to go back now and prove that everyone can do Shchita L'Chatchila would be a false statement. Okay, you haven't done your job in denying the complete statement, because you only denied the second gezerah, and you just made the statement more inclusive, but you didn't destroy the klal in the first place. Okay, that's a very important point to remember.
Saying that the two gezerahs are independent to a certain extent, where the inclusive one can still be inclusive even if the one that's excluding is proven to be false.
Correct. So when you're debating a point, or the Gemara is debating a point, or the Meforshim is debating a point, you have to be very, very clear about what was rejected. If the exclusions are rejected and the whole statement doesn't fall down, you still say there's no more klal, that might enter your mind, but it's false, he's saying. He says the cloud can still be, now the cloud is just a larger cloud. To destroy the cloud, you have to destroy the cloud, show it's not a cloud. But, right, there's two errors here, and they're independent. Okay, let's look at number 5. Number 5 was the Mugbal statement, the statement of condition. What happens if in a conditional statement we show that the condition is not correct? Here again, here we don't destroy the truth of the whole statement. All we do, is the first statement remains true, and the second one, which was the condition, that remains, that stays false. So we have work to do. You haven't totally destroyed the statement and shown it false if you just say that the condition is false, because that just says, okay, the condition is false, now the statement still remains. Here's his example. Umechalen also kesev al kesev, ubilvad she'yachzor v'yifte es haperos. You're allowed to do chilul of the truma from one coin to the next, from kesev to kesev, as long as in the final reality you go back and you do redemption on fruits. Okay, so now, ilu haya ze hatanai amiti v'lo yeh ze hachiyuv. Excuse me, I read that wrong. Ilu lo haya ze hatanai amiti. If the condition that you had to go back and do a final redemption on fruits, if that condition was not true but was false, and you didn't have to do it, v'lo yeh ze hachiyuv, afal pikein hayasa amiti sabizera rishona shemechalon also kesev al kesev. You don't say just because I denied the condition that the first statement that you're allowed to do a chilul of kesev on kesev is false. All I did was deny the condition. Now, even though it's physically one long set of words, even though that's one sentence, the sentence really has two errors. And if I show you that you don't have to go back and do the final pidyon on perod, I didn't destroy the first part of the statement which said you are allowed to do a chilul of kesev on kesev. So that's a very, very, again, a foundation point. If you wanted to just now destroy the whole sentence, you have to go back and show that you can't do chilul kesev on kesev. Okay. Let's go to the 6th type of statement, the hypothetical statement, the totally. What is a silkazera of a totally statement? First of all, what is a totally? It's if then. Shetol metzius inyan echad, but metzius inyan acher. It makes one item dependent upon another item. If you come to my house, then I will go to your house, says Kodesh Baruch Hu. Okay, so if you want Hashem to come to your house, that's totally, that's dependent upon you going to his house. If then. If you want me to come to your house, then you better come to my house. Okay. Hine ein so gezerto shum echad min ha'inyin bifnei atzmo. Here, the self-gezerah so is not dependent upon the truth of each part. Ach self-gezerah so hu hayosem nitling ze b'zeh. What's the intent of the statement is only that the two items mentioned are dependent. Both of them don't have to be true. They just have to, the dependency has to be true. Ve'ilu haya shnei inyanim emet kol echad b'nei atzmo. Say we had in a statement, an if-then statement, both of the items were totally true. Ach tu yasam b'zeh b'zeh, but they're dependency was false, then the whole statement falls down. Here's the first statement that doesn't depend upon the truth of the subject being found in the predicate in truth. What's important here is the relationship between the two items. If both of the items are totally false, but the dependency is correct, then the statement is correct. And he's going to give a derech marshal of this. For instance, when in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, when the Chacham said to the apostate, he was a hunchback, okay, and the Chacham was a hunchback, and a min came over to him, and he said, I'm going to give you a kick and I'm going to straighten your back. Yeah. So the Chacham answered back, well, if you could straighten my back with a kick, then you'd be called a great doctor. Okay? So let's go through that analysis with the Ramchal. Im ata ose kain, if you could do that, rofe uman to kore, you would be called a great doctor. That's what the rabbi said to the min when he threatened to kick him and straighten out his back. There, it's an if-then. If you could do that, said the rabbi, if you could straighten my back by a kick, then you'd be called a great doctor. Lo hayasa kavana so shiase king. He didn't want the men to kick him. Velo shikro rofenema, and he didn't want to call the men a good doctor. Both of those statements are false. He doesn't want to be kicked, and he doesn't really mean to say that you're a good doctor. Ella, she'im haya yochola sos kain. If it was possible to do that, haya nikra rofenema. If it was possible to straighten out the back with a kick, so then you would be called a rofenema. Ube'emes lo haya yochola sos kain. Really, it's impossible to straighten out the back. V'lo haya nikra rofenu uman. In truth, the min would not be called a rofenema. So we see here that both parts of the statements are false. He doesn't want the min to kick him, and he will not be calling the min a rofenema because it's impossible to do. But sarcastically, he was saying if that were possible, then you would be called a rofenema. Then you would be called a rofenema. So that dependency is true. I mean, if someone could do such a thing, he definitely would be called a rofenema. But saying it sarcastically, obviously, you can't do it. Okay. Keshamru Eliyahu, when Eliyahu in Malachim says, "Ve'im habal," if the Baal is God, leichu acharav, you should go after him. Now, lo hayasa mod Eliyahu chas v'shalom shabal hu Elohim. He wasn't chas v'shalom saying that Baal is God. V'lo haya omer l'bnei Yisrael sharo shi'alchu acharav. He wasn't saying, something, you should really go after Baal chas v'shalom. But what was he saying? A dependency. Ella she'im hu Elokim. If it were true that the Baal was God, then it would be ru'ui she'achol acharav. It would be fitting for you to follow after Baal. V'zeh hamama emiti batzmo. The statement is true. Because it really is true. Two things are dependent. If something really is the true God, then you should really follow after it. Ach, shekehu she'Baal Elohim, but it's totally sheker that Baal is God, and it's also sheker shirui she'achol acharav. It's also false that you should follow after Baal. So that's why we call this statement a hypothetical statement, because it's only true, it's only talking about the dependency being true. It's not talking about the reality. If it's raining, the streets are wet. Well, that's not saying it is raining, and it's not saying the streets are wet. It's just saying that if it were to rain, hypothetically, then the streets would be wet. So the important thing to know here, and if then again, is that if you prove that each part of the statement is false, in this case, if you prove that Baal is not God, or you prove that we shouldn't be worshiping Baal. So now this statement doesn't fall down, because the statement never affirmed the truth of both parts. The statement just said that the dependency is true. And since here the dependency is true in this statement, if it were true that Baal was God, then you should follow after him. This is a true statement, even though both parts are false. So that's the first time we got to a self-gezerah where each one of the statements do not have to be true. Only that here, in this case, the dependency is true. Yeah, go ahead.
It's more of a logic. It's more telling that the logic of the two statements and the dependency on the other is a true logical dependency, and we're not concerned with the statements themselves.
That's correct. Exactly. What's true here is only the dependency, but not the both parts. That's why it's called hypothetic. It's only if I were a rich man, I would I would sit in the Eastern Wall. But I'm not a rich man, and I don't sit in the Eastern Wall. But it's true that if I were, then the conclusion. So the Talui is the most important part, not the truth of both statements. And again, the reason the Ramchal talks about basics here, he often says, I'm not going to teach you anything new. I'm just going to organize what you know already. So when you think about these ideas deeply, so then you understand very clearly what he's saying. The problem is that we don't have these things organized in our minds properly. And that's where mistakes fall in. We're sloppy in our understanding, in our analysis. So in a debate, it can go very, very quickly. The concepts can move very, very quickly, and these little points can slip over. And you'll say, well, it's not true, A, and B. Well, then you have to answer, well, I never said that A was true or B was true, but is the dependency true? And that's the power of this little sefer. He's telling us the very, very foundations of how to understand clearly and to communicate clearly, and on what basis here to prove things true or false. Okay. Now, v'hefech zeh, in this Talui statement, in the hypothetical statement, im yu inyanim emet the what happens if both parts of the statement are absolutely true, but the dependency is false? Here, the whole statement becomes false. Derech mashal. In Tomer, if you would say, Im Moshe Rabbeinu kibel et Torah, shol hu hamelech rishon shemalach al Yisrael. If you'd say a statement, if Moshe Rabbeinu received the Torah, then Shaul was the first king who ruled over Israel. Hine, shnei inyanim enutim, kol echad mipnei atzmo. Ach, einam teluim zeh bezeh, klal. V'hamama hazeh, shetorah stam zeh bezeh, hu bilti tzodek. Here we have an example of both the elements in these statements are true in and of themselves. It really is true that Moshe received the Torah. And it's really true that Shaul was the first king in Israel. Both those statements are absolutely true. But what's not true? The dependency is not true. It's not true that just because Moshe Rabbeinu received the Torah, it has nothing, that Shaul was the first king. One concept had nothing to do with the second concept. So this statement falls down because the dependency is false, not the elements are false. Okay, that was the discussion of the Talui statement, hypothetical. Let's move on to the Merub Inyanim. Remember, Merub Inyanim, we had a whole discussion just to refresh our minds of the Merub Inyanim. In the Merub Inyanim, I'm just going to highlight that for us here. Boy, let me get rid of that because I don't like how it looks. let's use this one. Okay. Here's the Merubin Yanim. In simple language, Merubin Yanim means and or statements. The and statement puts a lot of subjects together, the or statements, and the or statements put them together also, but in a different way. Let's give an example. If I say that there's Arba Avos Nesikin Hashor V'Habor V'Mava V'Hever. Okay, so the Shor, Bor, Mav, and Hever are the Arba Avos Nesikin. Arba Avos Nesikin have 4 categories. So that's Merubin Yanim. That means the Shor, Bor, Mav, and Hever. And that's an and statement. Each one is true in and of itself. The or statement, he said, is that the Yivam can do either Chalitza or can do Yivam. That's an or statement. Okay? So the Merubin Yanim takes a lot of subjects or a lot of predicates and puts them together. Either they're together as a Yachad equally, Bahashva, or remember he said sometimes we can have them unequal, that one is a Chiddush and one is not. That's that little category here in the corner. Okay. Let me just do one thing here, if you don't mind. I got rid of my pointer, so I'm just going to put that back again. Okay. Okay. Very good. So we have the and the or statement, and we said that the and statement either can be equal ands, where each one of them are chidushim, or unequal ands, where one is a greater chiddush than the other, and we said that's the lo zuafsu, or the zuvein tzrich lo marzu. Then we said there's the or statement, which is exclusive, A or B, but not both. Okay, that was a quick summary of the different types of Merubin Yanim. Let's now go to his analysis of the Merubin Yanim. Hamamar Meruba Shemikabetz Nesuim Rabim Benose Echad O Nosim Rabim Lenosu Echad. What do? They gather together a lot of predicates and they say all these predicates exist in the subject. Or they gather together a lot of subjects and say that all these subjects have this predicate. Hine sof gezerah. So what's the final intent of the statement? Shekol osam hanasuin hem ba'oso hanoseh. You really have to find all the predicates in that subject. O b'chol osam hanosim yeh oso nasu. Or you have to say that all the subjects have that particular predicate. Val kain lishitiyat tzodek tzarek shekulam yu emet. So here, in order for that statement to be true, all the multiple predicates or the multiple subjects have to be true, or else the statement is not true. If it was not true that Shor, Bor, Mav, and Hever are the 4 Avos and Nezikin, only one of them is false, then he says the statement falls down. Let's say the derech mashal. Let's say the person can have 2 possibilities. O choletz, o miyabem. The person whose brother dies without children, he has 2 alternatives. Or he does chalitza, or he does levirate marriage, yiva. Im ha'emes haya shecholetz v'lo miyabem. If the truth was you only have one possibility, to do chalitza and not the possibility of doing Yibum, Hine Hamamra Hayab Bilti Tzodek. And the statement is false. Afal Pi Shechelek Mimeno Shehu Choletz Hayat Tzodek. Even if a part of it happens to be true, you still have the ability to do Chalitza, but if you didn't have the other part to do Yivam, then the whole statement falls down. V'chein kol piyotzi b'zeh. He says that the same thing is true with all the other types of Merubin Yanim. So if we found out that one of the 4 Avos and Zikin was not, so then the statement Arba Avos and Zikin, Ashur Bolam, have the whole statement falls down because we said that there's 4 types and would not be 4, it would only be 3. So the statement falls down even though a part is true. Very, very interesting. Because you would say if it's part is true, then maybe the whole statement isn't denied. But a Merubin Yanim says that no, each of the elements has that predicate, or each of the things that we find in the predicate are attached to the subject. So that's what the statement says. So,
why would the statement be completely false? So let's say you are saying that the nasu is 10 items, and all those 10 items has to be in the nosei. Now you prove that one of those items is false. The other
because the statement, excellent, because the statement says that all of them are there. The statement does not say that some of them are there. It says all of them are there. That's how he's learning the Merubin Yanim. The or statement is obvious, right? If I say A or B and there's no possibility of B, that's obvious. But he wants to say in Merubin Yanim that you're really saying that all these, like Arba, Abbas, and Zikin, you're really telling me that all four of them are Abbas and Zikin. So the statement, even though some of it would be true, the statement which states all of them are is false. It says the Shor, Bo, Mava, and Heva are the Abbas and Zikin. That's what the statement says. So the statement as a whole is false, even though part of it could be true. That's what he's saying here. It's very, because I would say like you, I'd say no, only part of the statement. I only disprove part of the statement. But then the whole statement then that says that the Shor, Bo, Mav, and Heva are the Abbas and Zikin, that statement is telling me that all of them are the Abbas and Zikin, and you must find all of them with that predicate. If not, then the statement is not true. Now you may say a new statement now that only three of them are the Abbas and Zikin. That's very, very fine. But you can't say that the original statement, which predicated the fact that they're all Abbas and Zikin, let's say, is true anymore, because it's not. It's a very, very fine distinction, but I think it's well taken. The statement itself is false because it said more than what was true. Okay.
Right. Okay.
Doesn't mean that again, but what you're bringing up is very important. Because I destroyed part of the statement, it doesn't mean that every element is false. It's true the statement is false in its entirety, but it doesn't mean that every element isn't. Now, if I prove that one is not called an ob, it doesn't mean that all the other ones are false. Maybe they're true. But what the self-gezerah of this statement is false. Yeah, go ahead.
But compare this to the one we had before, where you had an inclusive statement that was chutz. So we said that even if the chutz is not true, the beginning of the statement is true. So why don't you say also that?
No. He didn't say it was true. He said you haven't proved it false. He didn't say it was true. He just said you haven't proved it false.
Okay.
Okay. Just because I proved the chutz wrong, then there's two parts to that statement. It's making a cloud, but everyone could do shchis and kasher. That's the cloud it's making. But that's you're actually, you're pressing on a very, very essential point here. Okay. There he says you have to go further to prove the whole statement false. Here, I'm not proving the whole. I'm proving the statement as it is false, but not the whole statement. But it's very well taken here. For instance, the example that he did pick was the A or B. Now that's definitely no one will argue that if the statement is giving me two possibilities, I don't have the two possibilities, and the statement is false. But he says it applies to all the Merubin Yanim. Okay, so we'll consider that more, but that's what he says. He says, okay, now we're going to talk about the next three as a unit. Let's look at the next three as a unit. Okay. The next three as a unit were the low Ella, not this but that, the substitution, the Afal P, and the Madame. The Madame is the comparative statement. Now he's going to put that all in one unit. Let's see what he says about that. והדרך זה שלוש המינים, השמיני, התשיעי והעשירי, שכולם מקבצים עניינים הרבה. They all gather together a lot of subjects, a lot of עניינים, כאחד in one unit, להיות המאמר צודק צריך שכולם osam inyanim yu כמו שנאמרים במאמר. Here he says that in order to be true, then they all have to have the specific relationship set out, okay, as in the statement. So if we have a low Ella, which is not this, but that, so it has to be true that both elements have to be true. The statement is true. If I don't have the negation of one and the affirmation of the other, so the statement is going to fall down. In the AFLP, if it's not true that AFLP, if that whole statement is telling us that even though we have to wait, even though he's delayed, I'll have to wait. So then it has to be true that all the elements there are in that relationship. If they're not in that relationship with AFLP, then the statement is not true. Or the Medamer, if I compare two things, one to the other, and I say that this is like that, if both elements have to be true in and of themselves, and they have to be comparable. If any one of those elements are false and the dimion is false, then the whole statement will fall down. Okay, that's what the Ramchal says. It puts them all together in one. Shikulim, because there we're putting together a lot of different elements and giving them a special relationship. So in order for the statement to be true, then the elements have to be true in and of themselves, and they have to have that particular relationship of AFLP or Ella, or the dimion has to be correct. When it comes to the last one, the lefikach, now here he's going to say that there's three different self-gezeres. Let's see what he says here. Aha min ha'echad, it's 11, shehu sheyomer bo inyan nimshach me'inyan acher, where one item is the consequent of another. Hine gezerato shlosha. Here we're going to have three foundations that will mark the truth or falsity of the statement. One, you're going to have to say himotze hakodem, the first part of the statement, the since part of the statement. Remember, this is a since therefore. So the since has to be true. The himotze hanimshach, the consequent has to be true. The reality of the consequent really has to come from the precedent. Now this is going to be different than what we said about the hypothetical statement, the if-then. This is the since therefore and not the if-then. What's the difference? When it came to the hypothetical key, when it came to the hypothetical, we said both parts of the statement could be false. As long as the dependency is true, the statement is true. When it comes to this type of statement of the since therefore, both parts of the statement have to be true, and also their dependency. Derech mashal, for example. The statement above, we said, Haya over b'shuk, someone was walking in the marketplace, ve'omer, and one of the people in the shuk said, Talu lechem te'enim, take for yourselves some figs. What's the din? You can, ochlin upeturim, you can eat those figs in the shuk, and you don't have to take any meiser. Lefikach, that was the since. Since you didn't have to take trumas and meiser in the shuk, lefichach, therefore, im echnisu lebatehem mitatning vadai. If you brought it into your house, then you definitely do have to take meiser. So the fact that you didn't have to take meiser in the shuk, the consequence of that is you must take meiser when you come into your house. Now, Meiser, of course, we mentioned, only has to be taken when someone brings the produce from the field into their home. So the fact that we allowed you to eat it in the shuk means that we say that the people of the shuk never brought the produce home. They brought it straight from the field to the shuk. So it's on Meiser produce. So since it's on Meiser produce, therefore, when you go to your house, you must have to take Trumas and Meiser. So he says here, Hine Shlosha Inyanim Nigzarim B'Mama Hazeh. There's three things being stated in the since and therefore statement. Echad, the first is, Shecholim HaPolim Le'echol B'Makom Shehem Bli Hefroshus Maisa. The people, the workers are walking in the shuk. They can eat in the marketplace without taking Maisa. V'zeh HaKodem. That's what the precedent said. That's the since part of the statement. Chaya over b'shuk omer tolu lechem t'neim ochlin u'petorim. The workers are allowed to eat in the shuk. That's the kodem. Sheni she'im hichnisu levateihem chayavim l'taken bada. The second part of the statement also has to be true, that if you took this produce into your house, you must have the obligation to take Meiser on them. That's the nimshach, that's the consequent. The shlishi is shechiu am badai behechnis am lebayit talui beheter shehem tam ochad li hafresh b'makom shehem. The third part is that the dependency has to be correct. It has to be that the fact that you are obligated to take Meiser in the house has to be dependent upon the heter that you had when you were walking in the shuk, and the fact you didn't have to take it there. Okay, so here all three elements, all three gezeres have to be correct. You have to have the precedent has to be true, the consequent has to be true, and the dependency has to be true. Unlike we said when in the hypothetical where only the dependency has to be true and the precedent and consequent don't have to be true at all. So that makes this since therefore statement different than the hypothetical statement. V'hine kedei she'eh mamra kazeh emet. In order to have this consequent statement to be true, tzarech shekol shlosha hachalokim yu emes. All these three parts have to be true. Ve'im echad mehem lo yemet. If one of the three parts, the kodem, the nimshach, or the tuluya, if any one of those three are false, then the whole sentence falls down. Hamama bilti tzodek. The whole statement falls down. That's the end of our discussion of the Sof Gezer. So again, these are very basic points, but as the Ramchal said, his aim here is to talk about foundations of understanding and to spell them out very clearly, and to make sure that when we're analyzing a statement or making a statement, that we do it very precisely and accurately. And when we're trying to prove a statement true or false, we'll know exactly on which point the statement stands or false. So we'll end our discussion here, and B'ezras Hashem, next week we'll go back to the two chapters that we skipped, and we'll talk about now taking one statement and aligning it with the next and seeing how similar or dissimilar it is, and then finally we'll talk about inferences. So have a wonderful week, and Shavua Tov for those of you that joined us after Shabbos.